Europe is in crisis. A human tide has swept onto its shores, overwhelming borders and testing the very soul of the continent. The sheer scale of this movement is unprecedented in modern history. This is not simply a matter of numbers, though the numbers are staggering. Thousands of people are arriving every day, each with their own story of hardship and hope. It is a crisis of identity, of security, of values. The very principles that Europe stands for are being questioned and tested. The influx of migrants, many fleeing war and poverty, has exposed deep divisions within European societies. These divisions are not just political, but also cultural and social. It has fueled the rise of nationalist movements, eager to exploit fears and prejudices. These movements are gaining traction, challenging the established political order. The promise of a borderless, tolerant Europe, a beacon of hope after the horrors of World War II, is fading. The ideals that once united the continent are now under threat. The Schengen Agreement, once a symbol of unity, is under strain. The freedom of movement that it guaranteed is being curtailed. Walls are going up, both physically and metaphorically. These barriers are not just about security. They represent a retreat from the values of openness and solidarity. The very idea of European integration is being challenged as countries retreat into narrow self-interest. The dream of a united Europe is at risk. The consequences of this crisis, both for Europe and for the world, are profound and far-reaching. The decisions made today will echo through history. The stakes could not be higher. The future of Europe and perhaps the world hangs in the balance. At the heart of this crisis lies a fundamental question. What does it mean to be European in the 21st century? This question goes beyond politics and touches on the very essence of European identity. Is Europe a place of refuge, open to all those seeking a better life? Can it remain a sanctuary for those in need while maintaining its own stability? Or is it a fortress, protecting its citizens and its way of life from the perceived threats of the outside world? This dichotomy is at the heart of the current debate. The answer to this question, if indeed there is one, will determine the fate of Europe for generations to come. The choices made now will shape the continent's future. The continent stands at a crossroads, facing a choice between fear and compassion, between exclusion and inclusion, between retreat and renewal. This is a pivotal moment in European history. The path it chooses will shape not only its own future, but the future of the world. The world is watching, and the stakes could not be higher. This is not merely a humanitarian crisis. It is a crisis born of geopolitics and complex international relations. The wars in Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, fueled by Western intervention, have created millions of refugees. The instability in North Africa, exacerbated by climate change and economic hardship, has driven countless more towards Europe's shores. The conflicts in Ukraine and elsewhere add to the pressure on Europe. Europe is caught in the crossfire of these crises. Its history, its geography, its values, all make it a destination for those seeking safety and opportunity. But the burden is not shared equally among the member states. Frontline states like Greece and Italy bear the brunt of the influx. Eastern European countries, with their own economic struggles and historical memories of Soviet domination, resist calls for solidarity. The European Union, already weakened by the Euro crisis and Brexit, struggles to find a coherent response. The crisis has exposed deep divisions within the EU, not just on immigration, but on fundamental questions of sovereignty and identity. It has also strained relations with Turkey, a key transit country for migrants. The EU's deal with Turkey, criticized by human rights groups, has reduced the flow of migrants but at a high moral cost. The agreement is fragile, dependent on Turkish cooperation and European funding. The situation remains volatile, a tinderbox waiting to ignite at any moment. The arrival of millions of migrants, often from very different cultures and backgrounds, presents enormous challenges for integration into society. Language barriers, cultural differences, and religious tensions can create misunderstandings and deep-seated resentment. The lack of jobs, housing, and educational opportunities further exacerbates these problems. Marginalization and discrimination breed alienation, frustration, and anger. This environment is fertile ground for radicalization. Extremist groups, both Islamist and far-right, prey on the vulnerable and disaffected individuals. They offer a simplistic narrative of us versus them, of good versus evil, to manipulate emotions. They promise belonging, purpose, and revenge to those who feel lost. The internet and social media provide powerful tools for recruitment and spreading propaganda. The threat is real and growing every day. The attacks in Paris, Brussels, Nice, Berlin, and elsewhere have shattered the illusion of safety and security. They have shown that Europe is vulnerable, not just to external threats, but to enemies within its own borders. The fear of terrorism is real and understandable in these times, but it is essential to avoid the trap of Islamophobia and prejudice. The vast majority of Muslims in Europe are peaceful and law-abiding citizens who contribute to society. They too are victims of terrorism and suffer from its consequences. To conflate Islam with terrorism is not only wrong, it is dangerous and misleading. It plays into the hands of the extremists on both sides, fueling a cycle of hatred and violence that benefits no one. Section 4. Public outrage and political backlash. A rising tide of nationalism. The immigration crisis has fueled a wave of populism and nationalism across Europe, leading to significant political shifts. Right-wing parties, once confined to the fringes of politics, are now mainstream, gaining substantial support from the electorate. They exploit public anxieties about immigration, terrorism, and the loss of national identity, tapping into deep-seated fears and frustrations. They offer simplistic solutions to complex problems, blaming immigrants for all of society's ills, from unemployment to crime. Their message resonates with many, particularly those who feel left behind by globalization and economic change, who see their livelihoods and traditions under threat. They feel ignored by the political establishment, their concerns dismissed as racist or xenophobic, further fueling their anger and sense of alienation. They see immigration as a threat to their jobs, their culture, their way of life, believing that newcomers are taking away opportunities and altering the social fabric. The rise of populism is not just a European phenomenon, it is a global trend, seen in various countries around the world. It is fueled by economic inequality, social fragmentation, and the decline of traditional institutions, creating fertile ground for populist rhetoric. The consequences of this political shift are profound, affecting governance, social cohesion, and international relations. Populist leaders are often authoritarian and illiberal, challenging democratic norms and practices. They attack the free press, the judiciary, and other institutions that safeguard democracy, undermining checks and balances. They stoke divisions within society, pitting native-born citizens against immigrants, Muslims against non-Muslims, creating an atmosphere of distrust and hostility. They erode trust in democratic processes and institutions, leading to political instability and social unrest. The rise of populism and nationalism poses a serious threat to the values on which the European project was founded: peace, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, challenging the very essence of European unity. It is a challenge that Europe cannot afford to ignore, requiring a concerted effort to address the underlying issues and promote inclusive, democratic solutions. Section 5. The unraveling social fabric, eroding trust and shared identity. The most insidious consequence of this crisis is the erosion of social cohesion, a slow but steady unraveling of the bonds that have held communities together for generations. The fabric of European societies, woven over centuries, is fraying. The once strong and vibrant threads of unity and mutual respect are becoming increasingly fragile. Trust, the glue that holds communities together, is in short supply. People are becoming more suspicious of one another, and the sense of community is diminishing. The sense of shared identity, of belonging to a common European project, is weakening. The idea of a united Europe is being questioned by many. This is the most dangerous legacy of the immigration crisis, the fragmentation of European societies along ethnic, religious, and cultural lines. The divisions are becoming more pronounced and harder to bridge. The consequences of this fragmentation are already being felt. The social fabric is tearing, and the repercussions are visible in everyday life. Ghettos are emerging in major cities where immigrants live in isolation from the rest of society. These areas are often marked by poverty and lack of opportunity. Schools are becoming increasingly segregated. Social interactions are decreasing, and children are growing up in environments where they rarely meet peers from different backgrounds. The very idea of a multicultural society, where people of different backgrounds can live together in harmony, is being challenged. The dream of a diverse yet united community is under threat. The challenge for Europe is to find a way to integrate newcomers while preserving its own values and identity. This requires a nuanced approach that balances openness with the need for social cohesion. This is a delicate balancing act, requiring both firmness and compassion. Policymakers must navigate the complex terrain of integration with sensitivity and foresight. It requires a clear commitment to the rule of law, to the principles of equality and non-discrimination. These are the bedrock of a just and fair society. It requires investment in education, housing, and job creation to give all members of society a stake in its future. Without these investments, the divisions will only deepen. Above all, it requires a renewed sense of shared purpose, a belief in the European project as a force for good in the world. This shared purpose can inspire collective action and foster unity. Without this, the crisis will continue to fester, threatening the very foundations of European unity. The stakes are high, and the path forward is fraught with challenges, but the potential for a stronger, more cohesive Europe remains within reach.